Welcome, everybody, to the Bret Boone podcast, Turning Two with Booney. I'm Rich Herrera from the Infinity Sports Network. That is the aforementioned Bret Boone. Good day, Mr. Boone.
Good day.
All
What's
right.
happening, Rich Herrera? How you doing?
I'm good. I got a whole list of things to talk about.
A plethora of things. Plethora.
Would you say we had a plethora, a cornucopia of things to talk about today?
I can't real
Absolutely.
I can't define cornucopia, but I do know what plethora means.
Yeah. Was that from the Three Amigos?
Is that the Steve Martin movie?
Yes.
I don't know.
I think it was from the Three Amigos.
I don't you know how the Three Amigos I can instantly say, "Oh, that's Steve Martin."
Steve Martin,
But I,
Chevy Chase, and Martin Short.
but I don't remember a line. I don't remember the premise of the story. I don't remember anything, but I remember that movie vividly. Where if you go to Caddyshack or something like that, I can know every line, every. It's amazing, Rich.
Three
What?
Amigos. They were black and white Hollywood actors that dressed up as Mexican cowboys, and then the town of Lopoco something hired them to actually come and fight banditos.
I don't remember.
It's a great movie. Anyway, enough of that. Let's just get right to it.
You got it.
Big headline in the Athletic today. Mo Vaughn, fearsome slugger, named in Mitchell report, admits using HGH. It's an exclusive. I think it was Ken Rosenthal who wrote this, but Mo Vaughn forever had been linked to the Mitchell report. Never confirmed, never said yes, but now he's come out and said yes, I was using HGH when the Mitchell report came out in 2007. Bret, we need to figure out how we're going to evaluate, talk about, and understand that time in baseball. You played in that time in baseball, and we've got so many stars. Yesterday I was talking with somebody who's going to start listening to the podcast, former college baseball player, and I was wearing a San Francisco Giants hat, and he kind of looks at my cap and points at it. He goes, Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. Roger Clemens, because we were talking about the podcast,
Right.
should be in the Hall of Fame. We had Roger on the show. We'd like to get Barry on the show. How are we going to now, all these years later, we're 25 years later, 20 years later from that steroid era in baseball, how do we start to square that up with their rightful place in the game and using the context of how baseball was at that time versus how baseball is right now?
Well, it's obviously a hot topic. I mean, arguably top 5 greatest pitchers of all time sitting there with 7 Cy Youngs not in the Hall of Fame for an HGH supposed incident. I don't think he ever tested positive. Barry Bonds still to this has never tested positive. All-time home run leader, greatest hitter I've ever seen. But and we've talked about this a lot. It's like that generation, you can't walk around as a writer, as somebody that has a vote, and decide who did and who didn't use PEDs. Now, I completely understand Manny Ramirez.
Okay.
Actually came up positive on a test twice.
He did when he was with the Tampa Bay Rays. I covered him. I worked for the ball club at that time.
Now, if you're a voter and a man, and Manny Ramirez, one of the greatest hitters I've ever seen, came up twice, I understand your logic, why you would not vote. I get that. But it's a dangerous slope to go down where you're going to start saying who took them because you think they took them and who didn't because they didn't. When the bottom line is, unless there's a positive test, nobody knows 100% for sure who took and who didn't take. So I think it's a dangerous territory to say, oh, he's big, he hits home runs, he definitely took them. He's big, he doesn't hit home runs, he definitely didn't take them. He is someone that's a favorite, a fan favorite. He couldn't possibly have. He was a villain. He probably took him. I think that's a dangerous place to go, and I think they've gone there with a lot of players. So we can't play God. We can't decide who took them and who didn't. If you have a positive test, okay, there's some evidence, and now I can understand for certain voters that has a problem. You have a problem with that, okay, but you can't just start guessing and assuming because you don't know. Nobody knows. That was one of the quietest times as a player in the clubhouse. That wasn't something that was spoken about. You know, there were guys that got popped for it during my career that I looked at them. You would never know in a million years by their physique. And I remember a couple guys going, him? Well, then a guy would get popped that looked the part, and you'd say, okay, him. But I think it's dangerous when you start deciding who did and who didn't personally. Like, oh, I think he did, and I think he didn't. So I'm not going to vote for him. I'm going to vote for him. I think that's dangerous. And I think unless there's clear-cut tests, I think you got to put it all in one box and just say, I've got to judge these people equally and say they either all took it or none of them took it. And that's an equal playing field. If the pitcher's taking it, it's a hitter's taking it. What is it? Is it a level playing field? I don't know. I think we're kind of beyond the talk, but it's still there. It's that part of baseball history that's always going to be talked about. But I think it's a slippery slope to start deciding as an individual who did and who didn't. Your opinion. I think that's where a lot of people get a lot of things wrong that are really not educated enough to make those decisions. It's not home runs and looks all the time. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So I don't know why this Mo Vaughn thing came up. I mean,
he did an article with Rosenthal.
Oh, okay.
He did an article with Rosenthal, and Mo's been estranged from the game for a while. Now he's coming back around the game. His son's playing, and he did an interview, and he admitted to Ken Rosenthal, yeah, I used HGH, and I was part of the Mitchell report, and the Mitchell report was correct. I don't think people are tired of talking about it. I think we haven't come up with the definitive answer of how are you going to record the history of the game of baseball during the steroid era. Now, let me have full transparency for the folks that are listening to the Boone podcast. And Bret, you've heard me say this before.
Right.
I worked in San Francisco and I worked in Oakland. I was in San Francisco in 97. Before that, I covered the Angels and the Dodgers, but 97 did the Giants postgame show. 98, 99, 2000 was in the Oakland A's clubhouse. Mm-hmm. I knew what Balco was before I got to Oakland. I didn't know anything that was going on in Oakland, but I knew what Balco was. Somebody had told me about it. But I was a rookie sports talk show host, and I was an investigative reporter. And quite honestly, nobody cared back then. I used to laugh saying, oh, look at that guy. He must be on the pony. He's using Flintstone injectable vitamins. And we'd laugh when you see guys come up back during the offseason and they're just completely ripped, shredded, and yoked. Nobody cared about it. It wasn't that big of a deal until George Bush got up during the State of the Union and made a point of it. And then all of a sudden, boom, it becomes a big deal. So for me, I have a hard time condemning athletes that used performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs, because I feel like a hypocrite because I didn't say anything then. But for me to say it now because I'm standing 10 years later and all the writers that were there, they knew what was going on. I knew what was going on, but none of us said anything. So I think it's hypocritical for me to come out and condemn people when I knew it at the time but didn't say anything. But now I want to run for cover 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later. So with that being said, let me ask you this question though. Okay. So you're saying the players deserve due process, that unless they've tested negative, unless they failed a drug test, we can't say this person definitively used or that person definitively used, like a Barry who was never tested positive, right?
Right.
Okay. But we didn't test back then.
You started testing in 2003.
In 2003. So the guys that were using way back, we never tested back then.
So right. So basically what I'm saying is, as a voter, mm-hmm. you can't just have a bias and say, I don't think there should ever be a bias when it comes to the Hall of Fame. I don't care if you were a villain or a bad guy or had a bad reputation with the press. That's like a player that I didn't care for or really didn't like. That was an opponent of mine. When I get a survey at the end of the year, Player's Choice Award, that's not going to affect who I put down on that piece of paper, whether I like you as a person, whether I
Right.
don't like you as a
Because
person.
that's peer to peer
That's peer to
review.
peer. You're gonna get my vote if you deserve it, because I wouldn't be able to walk away and think I didn't vote for him because I have a personal disdain for him. That's why I laugh. I don't laugh, but I think it's sad when people say, "Why isn't he in yet?" Oh, he was a jerk. The press didn't like him. Well, I think you've got to get beyond that, and you've got to have integrity, and it can't be a personal thing. Is what did this man do on the field of play? Did he dominate his position for a long enough time to be a Hall of Famer? And when you start getting into, oh, he's the he's the press favorite, he's the class favorite, teacher's pet. Oh,
But don't we
he would never have done anything. We know that. Well, how do you know? There was no testing.
don't we cover sports like that anyway? That if
Yeah,
you're okay, hold on a second. If you're Bret Boone
right.
and you're fair to me, I'm going to be fair to you. If
Okay.
you're Bret Boone and you're a jerk, and I will remind everybody, the first time I ever spoke in person to Bret Boone, he blew me off for a week, and he was the only member of the Mariners who would not grant me an interview. So I didn't like Bret Boone back then. I did like your dad. That's why we're friends now. And I like Aaron. You're okay.
Yeah, but you ask my press that followed me. I had a very good relationship.
Let's say you're a jerk. Okay.
Okay.
And if everything's equal and you're a jerk, I'm not going to give you the benefit of the doubt because I just don't like you. But I can't just say I don't like you and you're great and I'm going to trash you anyway because I wouldn't have a job because I wouldn't have any credibility.
Well, I think you need to. The personal relationship doesn't matter.
But they're human beings.
It's all right. So I just gave you a scenario for me as a player.
That's peer to peer, not someone who's supposed to be watching out for the integrity of the game, which is what the media is supposed to be doing. Fourth estate. Our job is different than yours.
I see what you're saying. I don't agree with it. I don't agree.
But you understand where I'm coming from.
You either dominate the position or you don't. And when you start playing God and deciding who
the criteria
who didn't.
Your criteria is different than my criteria. Your criteria is peer to peer. Mine is supposed to be looking out.
All right, I'll give you an example, Rich, and I hear this all the time. Just say a writer says an article's written. If you did it and let's just call it player X, he did it the right way. That makes my skin crawl.
Why?
You've got no clue if he did it the right way or the wrong way. You just want him to have done it the right way. So that's how you write your column.
So if I write
the right way.
Wait a second, hold on. If I write Bret Boone did it the right way and I followed you, and you're
a huge fan of mine and you love me. That's being biased because you don't want me to have done it the wrong way. You see what I'm saying?
See, you're looking at this negative. I'm going to look at this like I've talked about guys. You know guys I've talked about that I've covered and I've admired as a person and as a player. So if I were in Seattle and I was working at KJR and I go, Bret Boone does things the right way, is that a compliment or is that a backhanded slap at everybody else? I would think I'd be lauding Bret because you know what? Here's a guy that I see work hard, plays hurt, is a great teammate, and someone that I would say, hey, kids, you can look up to him.
Oh, that would just be a fact, Rich.
Well, yeah, but then I'd have every kid walking around with your hair spiked up in the front.
No, I'm kidding. I can see it. I can see that, and I would take that as a compliment, and I would appreciate that. I wouldn't expect it, but if someone said that, hey. I prided myself in playing the game right, in busting my butt, being available, playing when I could play, playing hurt,
right,
being a great teammate. And if once in a while you get some positive press for that, well, then absolutely I take that as a compliment and appreciate that. I don't expect it, because there's plenty of articles, maybe a writer in another city that I didn't have a great rapport with. I tried to have a great rapport with everybody. I tried to have fun with the media. I knew it was going to be there every day. We were going to have to live with each other. And I tried to have fun with guys. I tried to make them a part of the group. I didn't treat them as player and press, as less than or more than. And sometimes that was a good thing, and sometimes that would come back to bite me. Like, wow, I let him in so deep. Now he's taking advantage of that relationship.
Okay.
I think there's so many different variables. I just don't like the fact that people come out and start pointing fingers at players they like, and they won't point a finger, but a player that maybe they didn't like that's in the same exact circumstance, they'll point the finger at that guy. One guy stole bases, one guy hit home runs. Oh, he must have. When really you have no clue. You have no clue.
You've
The
heard me on
majority of the cases.
Right. You've heard me on the radio for a while. We've been doing this podcast for 5 years. You've heard me talk about Barry Bonds. I personally don't like Barry, but does that cloud my judgment on how great of a player he is? Have you ever heard me mischaracterize, mistreat, or be petty when it comes to Barry?
No, and there's nothing wrong with liking a player. Or I had not a lot of guys, because actually most of the guys I played with and against, the longer I played, most guys were pretty good guys.
Right.
And I got along with 90% of the guys I came in contact with throughout my career. When I was a rookie, I hated everybody. But by the time it was all said and done, and I was in the twilight of my career, I kind of got along with everybody. So I didn't really have any bad feelings towards anybody. But there are definitely handfuls of guys that I don't care for one iota, and it doesn't matter to me if I never see them again. That's
Right.
not going to hurt my feelings. That being said, when it came down to credentials and giving them their just due on the field of play, what kind of a ball player they were, not kind of what kind of person they were, I'm always going to be honest and forthright about.
So I'll ask you to play devil's advocate. Are you being naive? Are you being naive when you go, unless you had a negative drug test, or unless you pop positive, unless you pop positive,
Right.
I don't think anybody used. Because that somebody's sitting there listening to the podcast right now.
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I'm not saying that at all. I think there are plenty of people that did that. You could never tell because they didn't train that way. They didn't take whatever they took and then
different PEDs do different things.
And then go to the weight room. Some guys were in the weight room. And Jose Canseco, who's the most famous of all time, who wrote the book, who actually put me in the book.
Put you in the book.
Falsely, but put me in the book. He trained like a bodybuilder. Bodybuilders look like bodybuilders for a reason.
Well, there's guys that use different things, like HGH. If you're using it to get over an injury, that's going to build up your muscles different than an anabolic steroid, like a bodybuilder would use.
Right. So same guys take, let's say if somebody takes something and another guy takes the same thing, one guy trains like a bodybuilder and one guy just rides the bike 3 days a week.
Right.
They're not going to look the same. A Tour de France, they're going to look different
Olympic swimmers
than a football player on how they train.
Olympic swimmers, long, sinewy muscles. Bodybuilders, big, thick muscles.
Yeah. So
all different. Okay. So
anyway, whatever.
But let's go back to this. How are we supposed to talk about, remember, and judge the era of baseball that you played in? I don't want to call it the steroid era, because you got caught up in Jose's book. And for folks that don't remember, Jose wrote his book, said, I was talking to Bret Boone at second base about how to use steroids. And then I don't know how it popped up, but they looked up the records, and Boone, you and Canseco were never on the field together at the same time. You never got to second base that year of spring training. You guys never played against each other, and it really discredited Jose's book.
Well, I got a call from who's the gentleman that broke the story? Big name guy.
What was he working?
He since got fired. It was like the Today Show. Anyway, I got a phone call.
Matt Lauer.
Matt Lauer. I got a call from Matt Lauer. He said he's doing a story on it. What's your take on it? I said, I've never had a conversation with Jose Canseco, maybe at the most throughout my career, and I didn't play against Jose all that much.
Because he was
It,
he was with the A's and you were
right,
with the Reds.
right, typical. And to this day, I've never had a conversation with Jose
I want him
Canseco
on the program.
outside of if Jose were to hit a double, way to swing it, Jose, or maybe a head nod. What's up, Booney? What's up, Jose? Which was, I had that relationship with a ton of guys I played against. We didn't have conversations, all of us, with every guy that got to second base, but there were usually pleasantries just exchanged. If somebody hit a ringing double, hey, way to swing it.
Sup.
But
Sup.
that doesn't mean we're going to dinner tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The
Sup.
most I've
Sup,
ever
dude. Nice
talked
hit.
to Jose was probably a 4-word conversation, maybe 8 combined between the two of us. So he kind of made this up. I had no idea where it came from. Matt Lauer figures it out, and then they had a whole story on it. And we never played together because I didn't remember anything he was talking about. We were never on the field, the spring training where he claims it happened.
But you played that same era, and that whole era has this fog over the top of it.
I don't know if it's necessarily a fog. Who puts the fog there? It's like
I think without having Barry in the Hall of Fame, without having Roger in the Hall of Fame, there is a fog. And everybody who played in that era, Bret, you listen, we've never talked about this. I hope I don't throw you under the bus over here. But if you Google Bret, your name's gonna pop up with it.
Absolutely.
And people might believe it just because the era that you played in.
Absolutely. And that's
so
something
your entire era has this over the top of its head.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, I can see that. Here's the problem, and this is why I get to a point where you've got to be, before there was testing, you have to put everybody in the same category and just say,
before there's testing, nobody cared.
It's the best against the best. And the criteria has to be that. Were you the best? Did you dominate your position for X amount of years, which gives you the criteria to get into the Hall of Fame? Because you can't sit there and start determining, well, I think he did. I don't think he did. It's not right.
So do we open it up for everybody that's there and we all judge everybody the same? Or do we? Okay, so you say
either
no matter
everybody
what,
did it, or everybody didn't. Now, I understand the positive tests in the 2000s. If writers have that angle of, hey, if you tested positive, you're not on my list. Okay.
Is that fair though? Because wait a second, hold on. Is that fair?
I don't think it's fair, but I think there's a little bit of credibility to that argument.
Is that fair? Because if I know now, I knew back then. If I knew now, I knew back then. If you're in the clubhouse every day, you can tell. You look at people, you see how their bodies change, you see their moods. It's pretty obvious of the people that I was around.
I think you're getting a little gray with you see their moods.
Oh, if you see someone that roid rages, for lack of a better term.
No, there's I was around tons of players. I have no idea. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't even aware of anything like that until the early 2000s. I had heard it. I never heard of a roid rage. I never saw a guy go, he's having a roid rage.
No. Okay, so there's difference between anabolic steroids and PEDs. Like the anabolic steroids that bulk you up. There's things that
PED is a PED, performance enhancing drug.
No, HGH is different.
HGH is not a steroid. HGH,
right? That's why I want to make sure I'm being clear here. There's PEDs.
PEDs are everything. HGH is under the PED.
Right, and then there's the old school anabolic steroids.
It's steroids, HGH. They're both PEDs. And I'll tell you what, they're trying to. Well, I guess Major League Baseball deems the greenies PEDs as well.
Correct. So let me make sure that I'm saying this correctly.
But there's a lesser penalty for a greenie than there is a steroid.
Right. So the guys that were using the old Soviet style anabolic steroids, there were things that you could see your head would you get that bump in the front of your head. You
Oh,
could see
goodness.
different things. No, because I would see it in football as well, Brett.
Yeah, but I didn't. I'm not seeing the same thing.
But at that point, you weren't seeing guys just using, the East German anabolic steroids. It was more sophisticated by the time that baseball decided that, hey, we got to do something about this.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, it all changed. And Balco was, hey, let me see, and we'll match up something that gives you something different.
Well, I'll tell you, and they changed the testing. Now, Major League Baseball has almost an Olympic style testing. To where when they were testing me, because I probably at the end of I probably had 12 or 15 times I got tested, but it was a urine test.
Right.
Now they're drawing blood because a urine test could not detect HGH. The only thing that can detect HGH is a blood test, which is a Olympic style. And they've, in recent years, added that onto the protocol for the Major League. Major League Baseball, I think, by far has the most stringent testing of any of the sports, closest to the Olympic style, which was the stringent, was kind of the North Star of
the U.S. anti-doping agency has been heavily involved in that.
And I think baseball, the reason that's the case is because baseball was last to the party. Football, the other sports already had and I'm not saying a stringent testing program, but they had one in place. All of a sudden, baseball didn't have one, so they brought the noise and said, "Oh, since you didn't, the rest of these sports are like, oh, they've been testing for years and years. No matter how lax their testing program was, they still had a test in place, whereas baseball didn't." And I understand historically, with baseball being what it is, America's pastime, people through the year, they hold records in baseball near and dear to their heart, I think, and that maybe that's me just being biased.
No, you're 100%.
Then people in other sports hold their records.
Well, from the outside, I also think when the pressure started coming on baseball and Major League Baseball and the Players Association didn't immediately go along with it, do you remember what they did? Do you remember what Congress did?
What year was this?
This is around the time of
roughly.
What year did Bonds? Or I'm sorry, what year did McGuire?
Oh, you mean when Congress? You mean when Congress
got involved? Right.
They had hearings.
Right. So do you remember what happened? The Players Association didn't immediately jump in and go, absolutely, we're right there with you.
Right.
You remember what Congress did? Do you remember what got everybody in line?
No.
They started taxing your cup tickets.
Oh, and they still do.
Right. So what happened was Congress is telling Major League Baseball, hey, get your act together. The Players Association is like, well, wait a minute. We have a collective bargaining agreement. You're not going to just start throwing things down and edict from D.C.
Oh, and so they tax my tickets when Rick Herrera calls and needs tickets.
Yeah.
Shit, so, I'm covering the tax unless I want to be looked at as a tight ass. Yeah.
Right. So what happened was Congress says, oh yeah, hold my beer, watch this. And they said, not only are we going to tax your comp tickets, we're also going to put the name of everybody you have on your comp list. And that's going to be part of your tax form that you get at the end of the year. And it becomes public record who you left tickets
That's
for.
what we need, just that huge government. Congress does such great work.
Well, what they did was they started taxing the tickets, and now they're like, hey, you're not, just because you're a big leaguer, I can touch you. And all of a sudden they go, oh, okay, I get Congress is serious. And that's when they changed everything out.
That might have been around the time, because when I first was in playing, you get taxed. Where do you play? Cincinnati, you get taxed what everybody else gets taxed. Now they started taxing you where you were playing. So if I played in LA, if I was in Southern California for 12 days, I got taxed $12 days California tax, which is 11, 12, 13%.
Right.
So you got taxed on what city you were playing in. Now the catch,
what state you were playing in.
Right. If you were playing in Seattle, we were zero. So people from a money standpoint, love playing in Seattle because it was zero. But as soon as you step outside Seattle, wherever the tax, if you go to San Francisco Oakland, any of the teams, the Angels, Padres, that's all taxed at the
That's all
highest rate.
California. So
New
it's
York.
every game you play, it's one
Right.
1/62nd of your salary gets taxed California. So you have to pay California income tax for all those games. But now players actually, Brett, have to pay the performance tax because you're entertainers. So when Britney Spears plays at the crypto.com arena,
Absolutely.
she's got to pay California income tax. Then she's got to pay a performance tax. If you're playing the Dodgers, you have to pay the 1/62nd of your salary, California state income tax. Then you pay that 1/62nd of your salary for a LA City entertainers tax. So you get taxed the same way that Taylor Swift does.
Yeah. It's
Government.
It's all ridiculous.
Anyway, there's more that we have to think about this. And again, yeah, let's move on. But I thought it was interesting that, we just, and the writers can't get over it because they feel like, I think some writers feel like they let everybody down by not reporting it when it happened. And now they're going to try to right things. Others want to put their head in the sand. Others want to drop the hammer on everybody. So we'll keep talking about that as these stories pop up. Injury bug hits the New York Yankees. I thought the Yankees put together a good roster going into spring training, and now a couple of their big boys are getting hurt before we've even gotten into the second or third week of spring training, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, you look back to a few weeks ago when Stroman had that kind of infamous press conference where he says, I'm a starter, I'm a starter, I'm a starter. Well, right now, you're the sixth star. I'm a starter. And I thought, in today's day and age, it seems to me, now I don't have the data to back it up, but it just seems to me that
I do.
there are a lot more injuries nowadays than in past years. It just seems like that. It seems like guys drop like flies, and that's why I think staying healthy it's not necessarily the strength of your roster, but it's the ability to who can stay healthy the best, the most throughout a season, who can keep their main guys healthy has the best chance of to be standing at the end. That being said, since the Stroman
presser,
you've had DJ LeMahieu went down with a calf injury or a heel injury.
Right.
He's going to be out. Then you hear Stanton coming to camp, and he's got, I don't know what he has, and I that's why I don't really comment on injuries, because I really don't know what's going on. I just hear that he's got problems with he's got problems with both elbows, and I know the prognosis is if he gets the surgery, he's going to miss the entire season. Well, I've never heard of elbow surgery that you miss the entire season, but it's something that's kind of out of above my pay grade. I have no idea.
Some of it's just Twitter talk and speculation. So I don't like to get into that.
Well, here's what I hear though. I hear late February he's got problems, severe pain in both elbows, and he's going to miss opening day. I've never in my life could you tell me I have problems with both my elbows, and in February you were going to predict that on April 1st I'm not going to be ready for opening day. That's weird to me, setting that out there that soon. And now they're talking about if surgery is, he's going to miss if not the whole season. That's a huge blow for Stanton, especially what he did down the stretch and in the postseason a year ago for them at the middle of their lineup. With Soto being gone, Stanton is a mainstay and someone to be feared in the middle of that lineup. His mere presence, I think, Soto and Judge were the two obvious stars a year ago in the middle of that lineup. But Giancarlo Stanton's presence in the middle of that lineup is a difference maker. It makes everybody around him better. If he's missed, that's going to be huge. And
he's an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, he is.
And then on the pitching side, with Buddy Hield and now Garrett Cole.
Well, the Hield's a huge thing. He's a rookie a year ago. He's going to miss, from what I'm hearing, 3 months, and he was probably going to be their fourth or fifth starter. And then we're hearing this news with Garrett Cole, who a year ago came out of the chute, missed the first 2 months of the season.
Right.
Was a little rusty when he came back, turned it on, and was the Garrett Cole we know when it got to the postseason in the World Series a year ago. For him to be down in 2 years in a row coming to camp with similar feelings in his arm, Man, that's got to be tough, and it's going to make them think, is it going to be the same as it was a year ago, or are we going to take care of this time? I think there's been a suggestion that it's Tommy John. They're getting a second opinion. If Garrett Cole goes down for the season, Giancarlo Stanton goes down for the season, and Heel misses half the year, Soto moving on to the Mets, that is a completely different team than we were sitting here thinking the Yankees were 3 weeks ago. And from a team that I would say wins has a good chance to win the American League Championship, to a team I don't know what to think. So we got to wait till all this, the dust settles, and find out what's going to happen. All I know is Stroman went from I'm a starter to now he's the number 4 starter, and anytime soon might be the number 3.
Well, it's our friend Jim Bowden. Here's this tweet. According to a source, sorry, people are calling me in the middle of this. According to a source, Garrett Cole has been recommended to have TJ surgery, but are now waiting for a second opinion to confirm the diagnosis. That's from Jim Bowden. So we're hearing that. So we'll see what happens with that. I will tell you this. I learned this when I worked.
That would be devastating if that happens.
Absolutely. How many innings do you need? How many pitchers do you need to have that inning? When I worked with Andrew Friedman when we were in Tampa Bay, he said you need 7. You need 7 starters to get you through a season if you want to win a championship at a minimum, because you're going to have guys that are going to go on the shelf. You're going to have guys that are going to get hurt. So you need to have 7 arms, because you're always going to have 1 or 2 of them that are going to be on the shelf. And if you don't have that depth, it's pretty hard to win.
Well, the thing is, everybody has 7 arms. How good are your 7 arms?
But are they 7 legitimate starting? Or you have 7 legitimate starting arms on your staff?
I agree with Friedman to a certain point, but there's a lot of other variables that make up a team. How good is your bullpen? You have
no. We just talked about starters. How many starters do I need in order to compete if I think I'm going to go to the playoffs? He says 7, because that way you can withstand the injuries that are gonna show up.
Okay, how many arms, how many starting pitchers did the Dodgers have a year ago?
25.
How about late in the season? How many Dodgers starters did they need? They didn't. Every game was like a bullpen game through the postseason.
Yeah.
And they're world champions. So Friedman.
They were devastated with some injuries. So you have to have enough arms out there.
And they still won the World Series.
This is before we had openers, which I hate.
Right. Everybody has arms, Rich. It's the quality of arms, and it's what do you have
so maybe 7
arms.
So this is a while ago.
Everybody has 7 arms.
Do you have 7 quality arms to get you to the finish line?
Yeah, but do you need to have 7 quality arms? Dodgers proved a year ago you don't. You don't.
To have 7 quality arms.
You don't.
They had more than 7 quality arms, though, in order to get to that position. Then in the World Series, they ended up running out of arms.
2. They were down to 2.
Right. But to get to the 162, I think you still need 7. I'll stand by that one.
I think you're wrong.
Okay.
Because of the quality of that Dodger roster. And now
speaking of the
hold
Dodgers,
on, let me finish.
No, I was trying to segue because you told me I was wrong.
I think you're wrong. But
I will agree.
I'm wrong. I will agree with you on this. Maybe statistically, you do need 7 arms. Now
so I'm kind of almost
variables.
Right.
They're variables. I think
right.
I think how the Dodgers won a year ago was not the norm. No. I think 9 times out of 10, if you go through the postseason and you need to have openers and a bullpen game, it doesn't go like it went for the Dodgers. So it's a tip of the cap to the Dodgers on how they did it. I don't think if they were put in that same predicament a year later that it would turn out the same way. All right. Next.
Speaking of the Los Angeles Dodgers, 2 more pieces of news I wanted to talk to you about. Doc Roberts working on extension for Dave Roberts. Your brother got his with the Yankees. Now they're working on one with Dave Roberts. Seems like a no-brainer. Isn't it weird? Dave Roberts got passed over for the Padres skipper job, and he ended up in Los Angeles, and he's been pretty tremendous in that organization. So looks like he's going to get his just due and get an extension.
Yeah, and it seems like a year ago they were well, not even a year ago, going into the postseason a year ago, they were saying how much pressure's on Rodgers and Aaron to have a good showing. Their
Right.
jobs are on the line, and now Aaron got the extension, and I think very well deserved. I think Aaron's done a great job, and I'm not just saying that because he's my brother. I think because he's done a great job, and he's done a great job representing that franchise. I think the same for Dave Roberts. I think he's won 2 World Series championships now in L.A. He's kind of the face of that organization. Seems to be well liked by the players, and I think he represents the Dodgers well. Coming off a World Series, why not get an extension? I think that will fall into place for him as well.
How would you have been playing for Dave Roberts? You know
Fine.
Dave a little bit. Would
Yeah,
he have, would he have been able to get the most out of Bret Boone? He's kind
it's
of
easy.
laid back.
It's easy to play for anybody these days. They don't want to. You don't want to. You don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Everybody's.
But how
We
would
got to.
Bret?
We
Because
got to treat
but
them good.
but
It might be
remember,
a detriment to me. It's a detriment to me. I need someone that gets
right?
on
I
me
was
a
just
little
going to
bit.
say, Davy Johnson used to make you mad on a daily basis just to get a
But
fire going.
that's when I was a kid, though.
So as a kid, all right, as a kid, who would have brought out the best in Bret Boone? Dave Roberts
David Johnson.
or no? If here's your choice, all right, because you know what Lou did to you to help you get started. And you know what Davey said. I used to mess with you just to get you going, right?
Yeah.
And focused. So who would Bret Boone have been more successful playing for? Dave Roberts or you know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Billy Martin.
Aaron Boone.
Um,
Not your brother, just Aaron Boone, the manager, Dave Roberts, the manager. Who would you have responded? Who would you have responded more
I think
for?
either one would have been a walk in the park.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I want that manager like Davey. He had to mess with
Yeah,
you.
but
He had
that
to
was
light a fire under you
that was
because you were
just at the
so
right time. That was
because
just
you
at
were
the
such a
right
pain
time.
in the butt.
Right. That was at the right time in my career where I needed that. I was a young
Right.
player. I was just coming over from the American League to the National League. I was establishing myself, and he was the guy at that time that was the perfect
Pushing you.
storm. A couple years later, it wouldn't have mattered who the
Right.
manager
So I'm just
was.
saying a young Bret Boone who needs someone to push him to bring out the best in you. Who would have been better for you to play for? Your brother or Doc?
I don't think it would have mattered.
See, I think Aaron, because Aaron would have just kind of given you one of those side eye looks, and you would have been mad and just had a ringing double down the line.
Well, yeah, but deep down, I know that's my little brother, and he's got
No.
nothing to
I'm not
say to
talking
me.
about you.
No,
No,
I
no, no,
know.
no, no. No, I'm not
I'm
talking about him
kidding.
being your brother, but just the manager. I think Aaron would have brought out the best in you because Aaron would
No,
challenge you.
but I think
Dave Roberts.
Roberts. I think he has. He has the reputation, but at the same time, I think he's got that.
Oh,
I think I think he's got that behind the scenes sneaky.
He can get to be right.
He's got his way. Those guys are both very good at what they do, and I think why they do such a good job and why they're a lot of times critiqued is because fans don't think they're tough enough on the players
You can't
because
be
of the
tough on players anymore.
well, because of the way the public side of it is and what's said in a press conference, how it's handled. They don't know what goes on behind closed doors.
Well, because we have a football mentality.
With Roberts or with Aaron Boone. And I can tell you it's much different than what you see on the surface in the dugout at a press conference when they're going to back their player up. But when the cameras go away and the press goes away, hey, step into my office for a minute, and things are a little bit different.
We saw that a little bit
that's what a good manager does.
We got a little insight to that with Aaron during the playoffs. We got a little insight to that when all the focus is on him. But we have a football mentality where we think a baseball manager should be able to go in there and scream and yell and give a fiery pep talk 162 times because that's what they do in the NFL. It doesn't work. I'd tune you out after a while.
But it used to. I mean, it used to be that back in the day, it was the
well, that's why
the Billy Martins and the Lou Pinellas and the Chuck Tanners,
Sparky
of the world. Sparky, who's refresh my memory. The Earl Weaver. How many times did Earl Weaver come in after a game pissed off and flip all the spread? I mean,
Right.
that's the way
You
it was back then.
people aren't built that way anymore.
Right.
Okay, so let me finish with this for the podcast today. Give me a manager, a comp for Dave Roberts of one of the all-time greats, one of those that people understand. Like if I was going to describe Dave Roberts to somebody, you know what Dave reminds me a lot of? Who?
Bob Melvin.
No, I'm talking about all-time classic managers, not somebody in the game right now. Somebody's going to be in the Hall of Fame or somebody we remember from 10, 20 years ago. Like
Bobby
Dave
Cox.
Roberts, Bobby Cox, kind of low-key.
Yeah.
Doesn't yell, doesn't scream.
He's
Has
got
his
some
guys
fire,
back.
though. He's
got fire when he needs it.
Yeah.
Okay. Who does your brother remind you of? All-time manager. Ooh, I've never asked you this before. You better be careful because your mom's listening. I think I stumped you.
Yeah, I don't. I mean,
because he's fiery.
When you say all-time classic managers, I mean, basically you're talking my generation and Dad's generation to qualify as a classic.
Right. So here's your brother's attributes.
Let's go. And the thing is, I didn't know those guys personally. I didn't know Earl Weaver.
By reputation. I got one in mind, but I'm going to let you go first. But here's your brother's attributes. He's fiery. He's loyal. He's got his guys back, and he's fair, and he has a sense of justice beyond anybody else in the game. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. So who are you?
So I got one. No, I'm going to make you go first.
Sparky?
You grew up. That's where I'm going. That's it right there. I was just describing Sparky, and I think I was describing your brother.
And I played against Sparky. Don't know Sparky well. I know the guys that played for him back in the day with the Big Red Machine, but in more modern day, the Detroit Tigers described him. You know, they loved him. They loved him.
He had everybody's back. He had his guys back. Yeah. And when Sparky would go out there,
I almost think maybe a Gene Mock.
I was thinking about Gene Mock, but I think Aaron's more demonstrative. Aaron's more of a cheerleader. You see him in the dugout, and he's fist pumping his guys. Where Gene Mock was a lot more mild.
Yeah, and my dad loved Gene because he was a thinker and he really respected his intellect when it came to the game and the strategic moves.
Joe Bandy was talking to me about Gene Mock.
Yeah. Dad had a real high opinion of Gene Mock.
Yeah, because I mean, think of Arnie. He's always going to have his players back. He always defends them. He's positive to a fault, which people get mad at, right?
Yeah, no, he's definitely
Nick Turturro gets mad at your brother for being so positive, right?
Yeah, I give him a hard time sometimes.
Right. You know, but you know the thing about George Anderson, Sparky Anderson, he was authentic. He was who he was, and he wasn't putting on airs for anybody else. And I'm not just saying this because I like your brother. Your brother's that way. Your brother is about as authentic as he possibly can be. And that's where people don't understand who he is because they're like, nobody could be that much of a Boy Scout, hellraiser, passionate, and have your back.
Aaron politics when he needs to politic, but when you see him on the field, those knee-jerk reactions, there's no premeditation. That's authentic.
When I watch him on the Yes Network, and then he comes on the podcast, he's the same person.
Yeah. Same dude.
Yeah, same dude. Hope your mom doesn't get mad at my comparing him to Sparky.
No.
I live in fear of your mom listening to the podcast.
What the hell does mom know about
She
Sparky?
already got mad at me talking about your hair. I don't want Sue getting mad at me for anything else.
She didn't get mad. She just said, enough with your freaking hair, Bret.
I listen to Sue Boone.
I had pointed out that day, you know, it's a good shtick for a while, but the hair gets old. All right. We're talking
I'm just
about
saying.
Again.
That's it. We're done. That's it for the podcast. Before I run into the wrath of Sue Boone, coming up on the show, who are we going to have?
We got a fun one this week. Kent Tekulve For all
We
you
are family.
true baseball fans. One of the
I
first
got all my
submariners I
sisters with
remember.
me.
And yeah, we're gonna have Kent Colvey. That'll be in a couple days, coming
In a
out
couple days.
Thursday. Yeah, you'll be listening.
All right,
to this
everybody.
Tuesday.
That is going to do it for the Boone Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, Bret. I will catch up with you later.